All right, thanks.
Give me just another second, Paul,
Okay.
on the live stream. Looks like the YouTube one's not starting, but we do have recording going.
Okay. You can upload it later. All right, welcome everyone to the September 2024 meeting of the 43rd Democrats. We have a pretty full agenda. As we typically do, we'll go through our meeting norms, etc. Emily, do you want to take this?
Yeah, I can. All right. Welcome everyone. Thanks for being here this evening. Just going over a few of our meeting norms before we get started. So to seek the floor for any reason, please raise your hand by selecting the reactions button in your meeting window and press raise hand. Paul will call on raised hands in the order that they appear, and once you've spoken, please lower your hand to avoid confusion. If you are calling in, you can raise your hand by pressing *9. If our chair needs to take a quick poll of the membership, they may ask you to choose a yes or no reaction. Again, that's found in the reactions or participants panel. There may be times during tonight where we disable the chat, but you still should be able to message host directly if you need help. For voting code help, you can email tally@43rddemocrats.org. And we'll put that in the chat as well in case anyone's experiencing voting trouble. So a few more norms. Please treat everyone with dignity and respect. If you don't know something, just ask us. We're very open to questions. Be aware of when to step up and step back. And remember, everyone here is a volunteer. And we all share responsibility for staying on time, which is something that our board is really proud of, is our timely meetings. Go ahead, Paul, next slide. We use Robert's Rules of Order. There are a set of parliamentary procedures that we use to run our meetings. You don't need to know the details to participate. If you'd like to contribute, just raise your hand and we'll help you from there. They can get a little complex sometimes, but generally saying I move that we approve, amend, postpone the resolution is in order. And you have a right to participate as a full member of our meetings. If you need us to slow down and explain what's going on, just raise your hand and ask us, and we're happy to do so. And if you are just the very best at Robert's Rules of Order, please use your powers for good and consider the impact of making complicated motions during our meeting and the timing of our meeting. So we are going to be doing some endorsements this evening. Eligible candidates must have submitted a King County Democrats questionnaire by the deadline. Nominations will ask for nominations for each race in turn. Any 43rd voting member can nominate by using the raise hand reaction, and no speeches during the nominations. Speeches, once we have taken all the nominations, we'll go through each race in turn. Candidates have 2 minutes to speak. This time can be ceded to another person in full or in part. And voting, after all nominated candidates have spoken, we will post the link to vote in the chat. So familiarize yourself with the chat box early in case you haven't already. We will allow 10 minutes to vote. You can vote for one or more candidates, or you can vote no endorsement or abstain. Candidates must receive more than 60% of the vote to be endorsed. Abstention votes do not count against the 60% threshold. No endorsement votes do count against the 60%. Candidates who receive more than 60% of the votes will receive an endorsement. And if no candidates receive 60% of the vote, then any candidate who receives more than 40 will be eligible for a single consideration vote. If in the reconsideration vote, they receive more than 60% of the vote, they will receive an endorsement. If they do not, then they will not receive the endorsement. And we'll move into our land acknowledgement. So although we are all joining virtually tonight, we'd like to start this meeting acknowledging that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe, including paying real rent. And if you'd like to learn more about whose land you occupy or have occupied, there is a helpful map that is native-land.ca that you can check out. All right, Paul, thank you. Turning it back to you.
Thank you, Emily. All right, let me put the agenda in the chat again. I encourage you to open up that doc and refer to it throughout the meeting. So just a few bits of news and information. It is September. Between now and over the next few months, we've got a number of important things coming. First off, we've got the November election, of course. That is a big event. And then December 1st, our new PCOs who were elected at the August primary will take their offices. If you are currently an appointed PCO and you were not elected in the August election, after you will no longer be an appointed PCO come December, and we'll have a process for you in January to become reappointed as a PCO. Then in January, we have our reorg. Elected PCOs will be able to elect a new board. Look for more details about that in the coming months. We have an open secretary spot where we can take a vote today if we have enough PCOs to appoint somebody for secretary, if we want to do that. In August, we had a incredible sunset soiree on a rooftop in Capitol Hill. Thank you to Rye for organizing that. A number of our elected officials and candidates came to that, and we had a good time talking with them, getting to know each other. Having an in-person event was a great thing to do. We also need a social media manager. If there's anybody who's got some social media experience and would like to do some tweeting and Facebooking and Instagramming and other things like that for the 43rd, please let us know. You can reach out to me or to Emily or to Rye and let us know if you're interested in that. We have a Pancakes for Progress and Canvassing event coming up October 5th, 10 to noon at the Seattle Labor Temple. We're going to have pancakes. Candidates are going to be there to talk with you. And then we're going to give you information and encouragement to go out and canvass for the candidates and causes of your choosing. In the agenda, there's a link to the event RSVP, and I'll get that into the chat here as well. And then last thing I've got is just as a reminder, we do have the November election. This is a pretty big election. This is an important election. And we encourage you all to do your part in helping get out the vote for local candidates as well as national candidates and issues. Okay, with that, we do have 3 PCOs who we want to appoint. Pete, Bridget, and Andrew. I think that I have seen Bridget and Pete on the call, so we'll give each of them a minute to introduce themselves in turn. If you can raise your hands so that we can ask you to unmute and introduce yourself.
Paul, will you stop screen sharing just so that we can
Oh,
see?
yes, yes. Thank you. All right, Pete.
Hello. Name is Pete Ailing. I live in Eastlake, and I saw this opportunity. I have some time right now, and I am passionate about democracy and want to encourage the end of political and voter apathy. So I'm putting myself out there to be the PCO for the 43rd district.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete. And then Bridget.
Hi there, I'm Brigitte Foltz. I am Gita for short, but I also go by Bridget. Thank you. I live in East Fremont, and I'm a retired social worker, and I'm passionate about particularly immigrant rights issues, being a childhood post-World War II immigrant to the US myself. And I look, and this is relatively new for me. I have been on the Legislative Action Committee of the Washington State chapter of NASW, but actually doing canvassing and out there networking is new for me. So, but I'm looking forward to helping make a difference.
All right. Thank you very much. And the third PCO candidate that we have is Andrew Ashiofu. He is, of course, our King County, one of our King County Democrats representatives from the 43rd. He's on the board. He has moved homes and is in a new precinct that does not have a PCO. And Liam, are we at quorum yet?
No, we are not.
All right. If you are a member of the 43rd, please use the link in the meeting chat to sign in with your voting code so that we are we have enough members to allow us to take votes in this meeting. With 40 participants on the call, I would hope that we have the 25 that we need. Yes, John.
A question. You
Yeah.
need, I guess, 25 members?
25 members, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mm. All right. The question is, you have to live in the 43rd? No. You need to live in the 43rd and be a paid member or a PCO. All voting members should have received a voting code yesterday, I think is when Liam sent it out. Liam, do you know what we're up to?
We're currently sitting at 23. So we're almost there.
All right. I'm looking at the agenda. We have two candidates, so moving, I'll walk through the agenda while we're waiting for us to get to.
Mr. Chair, we have
Yeah.
quorum.
Oh, we have quorum now. Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you all for doing the sign in so that we can honor this. So moving on then, endorsement of candidates. We've got two candidates who we are considering for endorsement. And then we've got endorsement of the statewide initiatives. And then we've got endorsement vote on the Seattle Transit levy, and then several resolutions. First up, we'll do the two candidates. We have two positions, the Supreme Court position 2, Sal Mungia, and then for Attorney General, Nick Brown. Sal, I see you here. I'll ask you to unmute. And let me pull up the timer. We'll give you 2 minutes to speak. Whenever you are ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all, 43rd Dems. In this 2 minutes, I know you want to stay on time. Just going to tell you briefly about myself, about my practice, and about others supporting me. So about myself, I'm the son of immigrants. My mom was born in Japan, my dad in Mexico. And I was born in 1959. And so during the early 60s, what is exactly cultural acceptance in our area. And I saw how my parents were mistreated, especially my mom, who had a heavy Japanese accent. And I realized that I didn't want to have that stuff happen to me. I used to watch a show called Perry Mason, saw how Perry could speak up on behalf of others. And since second grade, I knew I was going to be an attorney. So this wouldn't happen to me or my family. And I did. Went straight through undergrad, went to Georgetown Law School, came back to Tacoma because I'm a Tacoma boy, and became practicing attorney with Gorin Thomas Honeywell, my firm, in 1986 after a couple of clerkships. When I joined my firm, I started doing pro bono work. I started to make sure that other people would have access to attorneys. I've been the chair of the Access to Justice Board. I've been president of Legal Aid for Washington. I've lobbied down in Olympia, and I've gone back to Congress to gain additional federal funds for civil legal aid, something that is near and dear to my heart. That's the reason I'm running for this position. I'm hoping to make bigger systemic changes. I've been practicing law for 40 years, civil trial and appellate work. But now is my chance to hopefully make a bigger difference. I'm endorsed by Jay Inslee, former governors Gregoire and Locke, Attorney General Bob Ferguson, a host of other leaders. I think about 20 Democratic county Democratic organizations and about 25 LDs. I am hoping to get the 43rd support and help because it's going to be a tough election. And believe me, I'm just kind of scared of Dave Larson gets on the court. So I appreciate your support.
Thank you. Thank you, Sal. All right, and then for the Attorney General position, Nick Brown. Is Nick here? Or a representative for Nick? All right, I'll just speak briefly to Nick. In the primary, we endorsed a different Democratic candidate who did not make it through the primary. Nick Brown is the only Democrat in the general election running for Attorney General. And that is why we are considering Nick for our endorsement here. And thank you, Nicole, for providing that links for Sal's website. So with that, we have the endorsement vote for these two positions. Liam, can you put the link to the vote in the chat for me, please? All right. For these two candidates, we are voting for them as a slate, as we anticipate that we're recommending that. If anyone wants to remove one or the other of these candidates from the slate, please raise your hand. Is there anyone who wants to remove either candidate from the slate? All right. With that, if you can do the vote. Reminder, a yes is an endorsement, a no is a no, non-endorsement, and abstain means that your vote will not count towards the threshold. While we're continuing that vote, and again, reminder, the link is in chat, we'll continue on with the meeting. Next up, we have
do we still need to do our PCOs? The vote on them?
Thank you. Thank you. I got distracted with the lack of quorum and moved on. My apologies there. Thank you. PCO. So the PCO appointments. Again, we've got the three PCO candidates for appointed positions. I would like to do these three via acclamation. Is there a motion to? I see, Charlotte, you've got your hand up, and I see a second from Maura. Are there any objections to appointing these three PCOs via acclamation? Any objections? If you have any objections, please raise your hand. Any objections? All right. Seeing no objections, we have appointed these three candidates as PCOs for their respective precincts. Congratulations, Pete, Brigitte, and Andrew. Thank you for your willingness to volunteer and adopt your precinct. Okay. Continuing on the endorsement slate, let me put that in the chat again. While you are voting for our slate of candidates, we'll continue on with our meeting agenda. Next up, we have the statewide initiatives. We are going to start this with a presentation from Calvin Jones, who's going to talk to the initiatives and recommending a no vote on these initiatives. Calvin, if you can. Oh, there's Calvin. Let me remove my spotlight. And do you need to present?
I would love to present if possible, and I have 10 minutes, right?
Yeah.
All right. I'll keep it snappy then, but as I'm going through this presentation, definitely feel free to drop questions in the chat or come off mute. I'm happy to keep it conversational where possible. I still don't have permission to screen share, but I'll start my spiel. There we go. Hi, everyone. My name is Calvin Jones. I am the Outreach Director for the Defend Washington campaign, which is the slate campaign against all 4 dangerous and deceptive initiatives that will be on Washington ballots this fall. The initiatives are, Initiative 2117 would repeal the Climate Commitment Act and increase pollution and devastate funding for clean energy and transportation in the state. Initiative 2124 would bankrupt Washington's long-term care insurance program and strip benefits away from 3.9 million Washingtonians. Initiative 2109 would repeal the state's capital gains tax, giving a tax break to the wealthiest 0.2% of taxpayers in Washington, while cutting $2.2 billion in early learning and childcare funding from state budgets over the next 5 years. And Initiative 2066 would take away common sense planning laws that helps our state's largest utility, Puget Sound Energy, plan for the future and will raise rates for everyone over time. We can't talk about the initiatives without talking about the money behind them. This man on your screen is Brian Haywood. He is a hedge fund manager from Redmond. He spent $6 million of his own money, $6 million on paid signature gatherers to get these initiatives on the ballot. Some people say initiatives, oh, they require signatures. They're, voice of the people. For me, there's only the thinnest veneer of democracy going on. We're not voting on my 4 favorite policy proposals. We're not voting on your 4 favorite policy proposals. We're voting on Brian Haywood's 4 favorite policy proposals because he's been willing to put an unprecedented amount of money into state politics to try and buy an unpopular conservative agenda that the Republicans in the state legislature haven't been able to pass because their values are out of line with regular Washingtonians. I'll start by talking about Initiative 2117. This would repeal Washington's Climate Commitment Act, which is our cap and invest program. Essentially, the amount that large polluters are allowed to pollute in the state is capped. The allowances to pollute are auctioned off to these large polluters. We're talking Chevron, BP, Shell, Marathon Petroleum. And the money raised from those auctions goes to clean energy and transportation programs. The cap goes down until we are a net zero carbon state by 2050. So what happens if 2117 passes and this program goes away? Well, if large corporate polluters are allowed to pollute for free, you're going to see fundamentally 2 things. More pollution on one hand, because if Shell doesn't have to pay to pollute, they're going to pollute more, and you're going to see less funding for clean energy and transportation. Specifically, about 1/3 of the state's transportation budget comes from Climate Commitment Act dollars. Say, if Initiative 2117 passes, the ferries, bridges, potholes, everything that's currently in the transportation budget has to go back to the drawing board right at a time as transportation costs are going up. So Initiative 2117 is both devastating to our state, both financially, but also devastates our path to getting to be a cleaner net zero emission state. Initiative 2124 is deceptively framed as a sort of simple opt-in, opt-out of Washington's long-term care program, but the actual impact of Initiative 2124 would be to bankrupt Washington's long-term care insurance program called Washington Cares. This is a program that allows people to get a $36,000 lifetime benefit to help pay for long-term care expenses. These are things like wheelchairs or a ramp in your home or an accessible shower. Basically, the kinds of things that help people stay in their home, live with more dignity and more independence for longer, which is both good for the beneficiaries, because most people want to stay in their home. It's good for their relatives who can be compensated for providing care under this program, and it's good for the taxpayer because as soon as people start leaving their home and maybe going to nursing homes, the sort of expenses required to take care of them go way up. So it's really a win-win-win. Washington is a sort of leader throughout the country on long-term care. Initiative 2124, by making it opt-in, opt-out, basically puts the program on a path to financial insolvency because people opt out, the benefit goes down, more people opt out, and it kind of goes into a financial tailspin. Social Security is not opt-in, opt-out. Medicare is not opt-in, opt-out. Broad public programs that have broad public benefits require broad public participation, and Initiative 2124 takes all that away. Initiative 2109 repeals the capital gains tax. In some ways, this is the simplest. The capital gains tax is a 7% tax levied on capital gains made above $250,000 in a single year. And this excludes home sales, it excludes small business sales, it excludes retirement accounts, it excludes all the middle class ways that middle class people make capital gains. So fewer than 4,000 people paid it last year. We are talking the richest of the rich here in Washington, but it raised $890 million for early learning and childcare in the state. Passing Initiative 2109 would be giving the wealthiest 4,000 people in our state a tax break, and cutting $2.2 billion from our early learning and childcare budgets. And we all know how great a history Washington has with finding funding for its public education program. So Initiative 2109 is the simplest, but no less devastating than the other initiatives. And last, but certainly not least, is Initiative 2066. This one had a slightly different path to the ballot. The other initiatives were sort of paid for by Haywood signature gatherers. This initiative came from a group called the Building Industry Association of Washington, kind of a Trumpy group of older guys that sort of want to profit off of installing natural gas in new buildings built in Washington state. So they went up to Haywood and said, hey, can we pay $1 million worth of signature gatherers and add our initiative to your slate? And Haywood said yes. Essentially what the initiative does is it takes away a bunch of programs that allow middle and lower income people to electrify their homes by helping them get a heat pump or an electric stove, and repeals a planning law called House Bill 1589 that allowed for Puget Sound Energy to plan its gas portfolio and its electricity portfolio side by side, in a way that essentially allowed it to sort of maintain gas service to its existing customers, but put its assets on a sort of longer term better footing, because gas demand for Puget Sound Energy is in secular decline, and essentially the books of Puget Sound Energy couldn't handle sort of the financial planning of its gas business on its own. Kind of long and wonky and complicated, but needless to say, it takes away common sense planning laws. So Puget Sound Energy will have to rely on worse technology that's depreciating faster and raise rates to compensate. And it also takes us off the path towards decarbonizing our utilities, and it kind of entrenches natural gas at a time when electrifying homes is sort of cheaper in the long run, better for the environment, and better for like kids not having to breathe in gas fumes in their home. So like the others, 2066 kind of pushes us in the wrong direction so that we all sort of would suffer for the benefit of the few. I hope that was 10 minutes. I know that was a lot of information very fast. I will drop my email in the chat, and I will include a follow-up email with different ways you can get involved to fight these initiatives. But these are sort of fundamentally devastating. They fundamentally are good for Brian Haywood, corporations, and the wealthy, but bad for the rest of us. And we are encouraging a no vote on all of them.
Thank you very much, Calvin. Before I'd like to give you all some time to ask Calvin some questions before we move on to a vote on that. But before we do that, Liam, can we close the voting for the two candidate positions?
Yep, got those closed, and I have results for you if you'd like them.
Yes, please.
Unanimously, we are endorsing the slate.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Congratulations, Sal. Congratulations, Nick. Excited to have the two of you representing Democrats in the upcoming election.
Thank you all so much.
Sorry, I suppose, Sal, you're the nonpartisan position, so
No.
representing everybody.
Yeah, but thank you all, 43rd Dems. I really appreciate it.
All right, Rich.
Yeah,
Any
it's
question?
Defend Washington going out canvassing door to door, or are you just hopping on to whatever individual campaigns are doing?
Yeah, it's a great question, Rich. Defend Washington is not running its own field program only because it's just me and then Rosie Barber is the campaign manager. So kind of didn't have the budget or the staff to run a field program. But the No on 2117 campaign, it has more funding, more people. They're amazing. They're running an amazing field program. So I'll send out the link to volunteer with them. The state party, the Washington Democrats, are also sort of canvassing about both sort of Democratic candidates and the initiatives, basically in the districts that don't have competitive races, which the 43rd does not have a sort of competitive Republican in the race, as far as I understand. So you can also go out with the state Democrats. So I'll send out a follow-up email with the individual volunteering activities. But the short answer to your question is Defend Washington isn't running a field program of its own because we don't have the staff, but the individual no campaigns and other organizations are doing an awesome job.
Yeah. And just to add to what Calvin said, I'll send everyone will be getting an email tomorrow that has lots of options for getting involved in various canvassing. And the coordinated campaign has the Defend Wallet. And so that's a great way for anyone who'd like to help go into a precinct that is orphaned, that really needs some love, and help share the Defend Wallet as well as lit from our state party. So you'll see that all tomorrow.
Amazing. Thank you, Ryan.
All right. Thank you very much, Calvin. Well, sorry. First, is there any other questions anyone has for Calvin? Any questions?
That Elaine has raised her hand and that she was speaking.
Sorry, I'm not able to find the hand
We can-
raise.
Yeah, sorry. We can hear you, Elaine.
Okay, just a question whether Calvin's PowerPoint, that it's a very good presentation, and whether that is available in print or can be printed out for canvassing.
I would say I'm happy to send you the slides as a reference. I can send you I gave you the abridged version. I'll send some other slides that have messaging guidance for how to talk about the initiatives. In terms of canvassing materials, we have we call it a slate card, but it's like a half-page piece of literature. If you're interested in sort of handing that out at the doors, it sounds like Ryan is doing some amazing organizing with the state parties. You can go to him. Not that you wouldn't be able to be welcomed by Ryan, but if you also, for whatever reason, wanted more literature individually, I'll drop my email in the chat again, and you can send me an email. I'd be happy to get you some literature.
And Ryan, at the Pancakes for Progress event, we'll have that literature that people can pick up if they choose to.
Yeah, if anyone would like to pick up Defend Wallet, it'll also be available at our Pancake for Progress event on October 5th. And that's a great time to learn more about the initiatives, hear from candidates, and pick up things if you would like to pass out.
All right. We are going to move on to if there's no other questions, we're going to move on to the vote on endorsing or not endorsing these initiatives. We're going to do this via a resolution. I dropped the link in chat, and I will share my screen here so that you all can see it. All right, here we go. The resolution looks long. There's a number of words in there, but it basically comes down to whereas each of these four resolutions, a bit of information around how the initiative will harm the state and Washingtonians, with then therefore that we endorse the Defend Washington campaign and endorsing a no position, calling on our membership and Democrats to vote no on all of these initiatives. And so with that, right now we're considering all four of these a no vote or endorsement vote, if you want to vote yes or no on endorsing these as a slate. Is there anyone who would like to raise your hand and pull any of these initiatives from the slate. So anyone who'd like to pull any of the 4 initiatives from the slate? All right, not seeing anyone wants to do that, we'll do a vote on all of the initiatives together. Liam, if you can drop that link into chat, thank you very much. Just to be very clear here, if you vote yes, I guess we, in retrospect, I realized we could have made this a little bit clearer, but a yes vote on this voting form is that you oppose the initiatives. So you are voting yes to oppose. Does that make sense? I realize in retrospect, as I'm trying to explain this now, that we could have made this a little bit clearer in the initiative and the vote. So if you want to not endorse these 4 initiatives and you want to oppose initiatives, vote yes on the resolution. Yes, thank you, Linda. Right, and so we will leave that open for a little bit as well. Give me a second here while I try to find my voting code. All right. We'll leave that vote open for a little bit longer, and we will continue on. All right, next up, we have an endorsement consideration for the Seattle Transit Levy. Is there anyone who would like to speak to the transit levy? Ryan, might you be able to?
Yeah, I can do a quick run through. And thanks for sharing the text in the chat. So as many of you might know, our transportation levy is up on the November ballot. It is an important way that we fund a lot of our transportation systems. This particular levy has gone through a couple of different iterations. And while it's not quite as large or alternative to car focused as we might have liked it to be, it is a pivotal part of funding our public transportation systems, our bike infrastructure, the Vision Zero program to try to reduce traffic fatalities, important bridge maintenance that we've been putting off for a while that needs to be done, and of course, lots of money to fill potholes. And so if you go through, you'll see a couple of, mostly the whereas clauses are just giving information about what it's going to be doing: 350 new blocks of sidewalks, 160 transit reliability projects, the bridge maintenance we talked about. There's a whereas clause that discusses how we would have preferred it to be a little bit bigger and a little bit more focused on non-car forms of transit. And then the resolution is just that we endorse the transportation levy and that it's critical to our city's infrastructure and a safer and more accessible city. And we encourage people to vote yes on it. And I can try to answer questions. I don't have super deep knowledge on it, but I can try to if anyone has any particulars.
Is there any questions? Linda.
How do we usually fund these things? And why is it that we haven't?
We usually fund it through levies, because that is really the only mechanism that our state laws allow us to utilize for funding big things like this. So like levies are really the result of us not having an income tax. And so we are kind of pushed, like the modes that cities have for funding is pretty constrained to either taxes on businesses, taxes on property. And the levies are taxes on property, and they are regressive. As we know, we have the second most regressive tax structure in the U.S. For a state. But until we do some tweaks to our state constitution or get some different Supreme Court rulings around if income is property, that is what we're kind of stuck with right now.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Elaine?
Just wondering about scooters. And, you know, that's just like a very significant part of the transportation picture that I see, and where they're supposed to be, and also whether that factors into, you know, sidewalk use or dedicated lanes, or what all that is about.
Yeah, great question. So how the scooters, like where the scooters are and how they kind of are distributed throughout the city is set up through different legislation that the city council works on with the specific companies. So there are specific city regulations around like where scooters can be placed and all that sort of jazz. The intersection that it would have with the transportation levy is mostly creating more safe pathways, especially when we're thinking about like bike infrastructure. Ideally, the more bike pathways we have, the more we get the scooters off of the sidewalks and into the bike lanes so that they are not going over our sidewalk bumps and people are falling and hitting each other or trying to scoot around people who are walking on the sidewalks. So really like all of the, and some of the pedestrian infrastructure changes in here for the Vision Zero stuff would also help with preventing scooter collisions with cars. So that's really the only main intersection of the transportation levy. If we wanted to modify things like where scooters can be parked and how many there are and all that sort of jazz, that would be separate legislation and separate policy that the city has set up, not through the levy.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you very much, Ryan. With that, we'll move to a vote on whether to endorse the transportation levy or not. Liam, if you can put the text, sorry, the link in the chat. Thank you very much for that. We will be closing the vote on the endorsing the no position, the opposed position on the 4 ballot initiatives here in just a minute. Let me stop sharing this. There we go. All right. If everyone can please vote on whether to endorse the transportation levy, we will continue on with our agenda. Wow, we are like basically right on time. Thank you all very much. Next up, we have a resolution. This is not, we've concluded the endorsement portion of the meeting with the vote on the Seattle Transit Levy, and we're now moving on to some other resolutions. We have a resolution supporting education funding with a presentation from Oliver. Oliver, if you can raise your hand so we can spotlight you and give you the floor. All right.
Awesome. Hi, folks. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen here. Thank you for having me tonight. Oh, it's disabled for sharing screen, but I can get started without slides. I'm a middle school teacher by heart, so it's by nature to give some visuals, but I can get started. I'm a Seattle Public School substitute and also a community organizer working at the intersections of racial and economic justice and education policy at the state legislature, at City Hall, and at the school board. I have the pleasure really of working with experts like University of Washington Professor David Knight and helping them translate their research into accessible information and meaningful advocacy campaigns. I also do that work with Washington Ethnic Studies Now, which is working on an ethnic studies campaign at the state legislature. I also organize with students who are working at City Hall around mental health funds. So kind of helping support in a couple different directions, mostly around education work. So happy to be here and talking to folks. Also, lifelong Capitol Hill resident, sadly displaced and now in the 37th. But lived there my whole life. So thanks for having me. So we're really excited to bring to you
Oliver,
today.
you should be able to share now.
Okay, awesome. We're excited to chat today. And I say we, but it really is we, in that there's a lot of folks working on this campaign, and I don't like the full screen mode, but I'll give it to you in presenter view. Can folks see? Great. So we had the pleasure of working on the Big Five campaign, and based off a lot of University of Washington Professor David Knight's research, and a lot of educators, parents, and advocates really from across the state, community organizations, even candidates like Sean Scott from the 43rd and Alexis Mercedes Rink have endorsed the campaign because they know that our schools are in crisis. And school districts across the state are facing budget crises. Schools are being cut, teachers are being laid off, schools are being closed, and we're in one of the wealthiest states in the country and the fastest growing. And we're continuously underfunding our schools, and we have the second most regressive tax code in the country, as many of y'all know, and we're second to Florida, as I like to say. Unfortunately, I don't like to say it, but it's the truth. So we're really pushing for the Big Five priorities because which are building off of the Washington Association of School Administrators, WASA, which are some of the big education stakeholders' priorities, which are great, right? We need to fully fund special education. We need to fulfill K-12 education, transportation. We need to address inflation, but we can't equitably fund our schools until we have a really progressive revenue system so that we can equitably fund our schools with a progressive funding model. Many of you might have heard we have a progressive funding, a regressive funding model called the prototypical model. So we have until January to really challenge this. Right now, there's been petitions going out, emails to legislators, hundreds have been going out. Folks have been signing on to the pledge, as I mentioned. A colleague and I, another teacher, were featured in the news talking about the Big Five recently at the school board meeting, which I will not play. But we're really here to talk about is really addressing this regressive tax code that you've seen. I'm probably sure you've seen these graphics maybe too many times by now. But it really shows you that the lowest 20th percentile of income earners are paying 13% of their taxes, while the top 1% only pay 4%. Shows you how regressive our system is funding our schools. And as you saw with Sean Scott's op-ed the other day, maybe in The Stranger, and hopefully if you see in our Back to School series in the Emerald, we're really building out to understand that this will take progressive revenue and it'll change we need to change our allocation model. And so we really strongly, I can't really explain everything, all these details now, it's a complex system, but I really encourage y'all to look into the Back to School series and check out some of the articles that we published, including today. Oops, let me just go back here. Today we published down here the K through 12 Education Finance, a People's Guide. in order to really break these things down and make them more accessible. So if you have questions about where do these numbers break down, how to, want to get into it, please, I encourage you to, check these out. You can also check out our website at the People's Big Five that just launched. All this is grassroots, like educators, working hard, building coalition. And I want to break down that there's a lot of folks talking about this, right? It is a crisis in our city. There are some plans that are being proposed for a $2 billion spending package. That's like WASA's plan. And that's also what some advocates in Seattle are calling for. And then Superintendent Chris Reichel just came out with a plan this week to say, calling for 3%, or sorry, $3 billion increase. All of these ways of thinking about education spending are regressive because they think about trying to spend 50% of our budget, but our budget doesn't account for the wealth of our state. It doesn't take into consideration GDP. And most education experts think about GDP instead of thinking about percent of budget. Because if we think about that, we think about our revenue, we think about really a percent of our effort for education spending. So I really like to think about 4%, getting to 4%, moving from 3 to 4% as really trying to get Washington to lead the way as a goalpost of we're only spending 4% of our state GDP on education. Can we get to that goalpost? It would actually take $10 billion more per year. And so while the Big Five is really a framework of values for supporting progressive revenue and supporting getting more funds, allocating more funds to schools in higher poverty areas. It's really just the beginning of setting the precedent for shifting the conversation to including progressive revenue, because without it, we'll never fund our education system and we'll keep closing our schools. And so that's why we're calling on the 43rd, and we're actually and LDs across the state. And I think we can lead the way to say, we're not just trying to find a solution that will benefit Seattle, but we're trying to find a solution for education spending that will benefit our entire state. Because we know that we could lead the way and just benefit us with raising levies and raising property taxes and raising the local levy caps. That's really just for us. The Big Five is about true equity and true equity for our whole state, and it is our state's paramount duty to fund education. So I'm thankful to have submitted this resolution for consideration for the 43rd, and I really appreciate y'all taking the time tonight and listen to me kind of go on my spiel here. I will drop any links to the website in the chat. And please reach out with any questions on the site.
And Oliver, if you send me your slide deck, I'll include that in our mail to all of our membership as well. There was a question that Linda had about where the 4% came from, 4% target.
Yeah, that's a great question. So across the country, 4% would be on the higher end of across the country, and so that's kind of the goal. I think it would be way above the average, but it comes from David Knight's work and assessing kind of what is the global average. It actually looks beyond US and looks at international standards for in terms of percent of GDP effort, because that's what the international standards are.
Thank you. Elaine?
I'm just wondering, thanks for presenting this, Oliver. I'm wondering, given the status of the education budget, we're looking at right now with the closure of schools and all that, you have to wonder if people will be receptive to appeals for much higher budgeting, which I agree with. But I'm thinking I'm wondering if you have allies, say in Eastern Washington or out on coastal Washington, you know, places that are really rural, that really do have these challenges, that they have buy-in to the principles that you're talking about, and are advocating with you.
Yeah, no, that's a great question because we know that calling for more education spending from Seattle is historically never been listened to very well. And in fact, it can be a negative coming from just Seattle. And so while I think we're really just kind of launching this campaign in terms of official endorsement. There's no LDs on the east side that have endorsed yet. I've been talking to candidates and we're working on getting endorsements with different school boards, because we're working within the school, really within a rank and file network of educators. And I think Jeff Paul is one of them and does a lot of the sort of internal organizing for working really across the state. So I think maybe you could speak a little bit better to that, Jeff.
Hey everybody, my name is Jeff Paul. Yeah, as Albert said, I'm an educator. I work in Seattle Public Schools. I'm also a member of the 43rd. Failed in my run for PCO, RIP. But yeah, I was actually just talking with some folks from around the state this past weekend, some educators who are all part of Washington Education Association, which does not have an official position or anything. Let me be clear. But particularly the number 4 of this big 5, talking about addressing how we're actually funding education, the allocation model from the state is really appealing, particularly to rural districts who are just getting the short end of the stick time and time again with the way that our funding model currently works. I totally can get into the weeds. I'd encourage everyone to follow along for the articles that are in the chat to like learn the specifics. But I mentioned the big 5 to a couple folks I was in this room with, and their eyes were just lighting up. They're like, oh my gosh, we've been talking about this for years. So I think the recognition that we'll need to increase our state revenue in order to fully fund this, but then also making sure that we're allocating that funding equitably to ensure that rural and urban districts are getting what they need to support their kids is going to have really widespread support. So that's why I think the Big 5 is such a wonderful campaign for us to get behind, because I think it is really pulling a lot of different stakeholders together in a way that could like really build some power to push for meaningful change that people have been fighting for years now.
Yeah, sorry, Paul. There was also the question in the chat from Linda, does it require a constitutional amendment? You know, the thing about this resolution is that for when we say that the therefore is, you know, therefore be it resolved that, you know, we support progressive revenue policy that is launched this session by our, you know, the leaders, and we'll push our LD and our representatives to support that legislation. I think we know that a lot of the representatives of the 43rd are already supporting this legislation. We also know, and because I actually just finished a conversation today with Balance Our Tax Code, which is the coalition of over 100 organizations working on developing and advocating for the progressive revenue policies. And obviously we're all kind of waiting. Many folks are, you know, there's the rhetoric of waiting on November to determine what the policies will be this upcoming session. There will be information on some of these policies as early as October, and then a very clear indication and introduction of these policies by the Balance Our Tax Code Coalition in December. And so this is a guidelines to say we support progressive revenue. It doesn't have nor does it stipulate what those progressive revenue sources are. So, you know, yeah, I do see it as broad and I as a general statement of endorsement for progressive revenue sources, and without going into too many details. I hope that answers your question.
With that, why don't we walk through the resolution quickly here so people can see what it is that we'd be voting on. I'll kind of take us through that. Oliver, feel free to interrupt and explain details as needed. So we've got whereas, sorry, let me go up to the top. Supporting the big 5 legislative priorities by taxing the rich. Reminder that the 43rd endorsed the resolution supporting the wealth tax. Reminder that the Washington State Constitution declares that providing for the education of all children is a paramount duty of the state. For years, many years, parents, students, educators, advocates have called for equitable school funding. Our school funding formula is not equitable. That's this one. Areas of lower property values pay higher tax rates, but can't generate enough money. We don't even have enough money here in Seattle. The next whereas is around Washington's inequitable regressive taxation. You can see a couple of charts here. Let me boost. Whew. Oh my gosh, sorry. My machine is running slow, so I have to give it time to catch up whenever I do this. Okay, that's maybe a little bit better.
It's okay. It turns out you can do a great job explaining it.
So you can see here a couple of charts around property tax and total tax. You know, interest here is the top 5% are the least taxed in terms of property tax in Washington State. And you can see on the chart on the left that the top 5% again are paying the least amount of tax amongst all taxpayers within Washington. This puts the regressive nature of our tax system into pictures. We've got historic budget deficits. We're seeing this very clearly here in Seattle with the proposal to close 21 schools. Next, whereas education spending is under threat, the U.S. House is pushing to cut it. Project 2025 is looking at gutting public education as well in the extraordinarily unfortunate circumstance that Trump might win. And then there's some information about the big 5 legislative priorities. Number 1, these are all ones that Oliver went through: fully funding actual costs of special education, other student needs, increased funding for material supplies, etc., increased funding for transportation. Number 4, increase equitable allocation of funds to higher poverty districts. And 5, passing progressive revenue so that we don't continue to use our highly regressive tax structure to poorly fund schools today. And then the therefores, we support a robust menu of progressive revenue. So as Oliver was saying, it doesn't call for a specific tax or a specific funding model, but just robust progressive revenue options. Support for this piece of legislation. Oliver, if you could maybe talk a little bit more about this one.
Yeah, I can happily speak to that. So last session, Senator Twiner Nobles, closer to Tacoma, I think the 28th, she's co-chair of the Senate Education Committee. She submitted this proposal to expand LEA funding. And what LEA funding does is it ultimately, it gives a higher proportion of funds to school districts with higher percentage of poverty. It really is one of the main, it's David Knight's sort of preferred way of reallocating money in an equitable way in our state. Unfortunately, it was killed last session because the chair of that committee from the 21st, which is Mercer Island, it would not benefit Mercer Island School District necessarily, and so there was some squabbles there in the Senate And so there's been a lot of pressure for, sort of desire for increased pressure for this piece of legislation in the upcoming session.
Thanks. And the final, therefore, is calling on all Democrats in the legislature, and particularly Senator Peterson, Representative Macri, and the forthcoming representative. We endorse Sean Scott in that race, of course, to support legislation that supports the Big Five priorities and enact progressive revenue options. Are there any questions about the resolution? Let me stop screen sharing as well so I can see if there's hands. Any questions about the resolution? All right. Okay, so with that, we've had a fairly robust conversation for the resolution. Is there anyone who would like to speak against the resolution? Does anyone like to speak against the resolution? If so, please raise your hand. All right, seeing none, Liam, if you wouldn't mind putting the link in chat, and then we'll also close. Thank you very much. We'll also close now voting on the levy, the transportation levy. And if you can provide those results while we are voting here on this education funding resolution.
Yep, I've got the results for both the resolution opposing the statewide initiatives, and with 32 votes in favor of our resolution, so against the initiatives, and 1 vote no, not supporting our resolution, the resolution is adopted.
Awesome.
And then on the transportation levy, with 20 yes votes, 4 no votes, and 2 yes votes, the yes votes have it.
All right. Thank you. And then Liam has put the link to the voting form for the school funding resolution into chat. Please vote for that one as well. All right. We have got another resolution coming up. I've put the link to this resolution in the chat. Let me share my screen so we can all see this resolution together. All right, I'll speak to this and then I'll hand it over to Emily during the vote portion, since I'm sponsoring this resolution. Just very briefly, some context. There's been discussion in Sale City Council over the summer around the minimum wage laws within Seattle. If you remember, there was the fight a number of years ago for $15 minimum wage. As part of that struggle, there was a compromise that was created that for 10 years, employees who receive tips those tips would contribute towards the minimum wage that they were due. At the beginning, January of 2025, that compromise ends, and all employees will be on the same minimum wage with tipped workers getting their tips on top of minimum wage, as was intended with the $15 proposal. There has been some talk within the Seattle City Council of making that sub-minimum wage for tipped workers permanent. That was put forward by District 3 Council Member Joya Hollingsworth. She has since withdrawn that proposal, but in withdrawing it said that she was going to work with business owners, labor unions, and the mayor's office to find a, as she put it, a balanced solution to minimum wage. And so this fight for a living wage seems to not yet be over. And so this this resolution here, I'll just go through it quickly. We in our platform support a livable minimum wage that's tied to and increases with inflation. We in our platform also oppose paying tip workers less of a lower minimum wage than non-tipped ones. We also passed a resolution calling for gig workers to be paid a minimum wage plus their tips plus expenses. We also supported the $15 minimum wage fight 10 years ago, and that's what included the compromise with the so-called tip credit that would give tipped workers a sub-minimum wage for 10 years. The state platform supports a livable minimum wage tied to the median market housing rate and a cessation of all sub-minimum wages. And then the context that Councilmember Hollingsworth has proposed a permanent minimum wage for tipped workers, withdrew the proposal, and in withdrawing said that she was going to work to create new legislation that would find some solution between eliminating the sub-minimum wage and the sub-minimum wage solution that she had before. And so therefore be it resolves, we stand in solidarity with workers fighting for a living wage. We support the existing Seattle minimum wage ordinance. It's going to phase out the two-tier wage and the tip credit in January of 2025. And finally, that we call on Councilmember Hollingsworth, Mayor Harrell, the entire city council to maintain the current law and not work to undermine it, so that all workers are guaranteed the minimum wage. And with that, are there any questions about the resolution? Any questions about the resolution? Right, seeing no questions of the resolution, Emily, I will turn it over to you to manage the speeches for and against and the call for the vote.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Would anyone like to speak against this resolution? If you could raise your hand. All right, Linda, I see your hand. Go ahead.
I think living wage is important, but what I've been reading is that the actual effect of this legislation has lowered work for these workers because it's raised the price of services so high that people simply aren't buying them. Does anybody have any information to counter that argument?
Thanks, Linda. Paul, would you like to respond? I see that you came off mute.
Yeah, I don't have any specific specific information I'll point you to on that. I'll note that tipped wages are typically amongst restaurant workers, and we continue to have restaurants that start and die all the time in Seattle. I don't believe there's been any greater increase of restaurants closing because of wages. You know, their restaurants are still suffering the impacts of COVID. But I don't think that there's been any research that I've seen that points to minimum wage issues being a factor in this.
Thanks, Paul. Would anyone like to speak in favor of this resolution? Deborah, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I'm trying to use my phone here. Yeah, I just quickly wanted to say that whole argument about how, well, if we raise wages, then we'll have to cut hours is kind of like a standard response to any attempt to raise the minimum wage, like whether for tipped or non-tipped workers. And I don't think it really plays out in the data, but unfortunately, I don't have anything specific to point to. And also just want to say that, like, I think personally, from my perspective, tipping culture is well ingrained in our society, but not necessarily the best way to support workers and to support our community. So there are a lot of restaurants that have actually gotten rid of tipping and in exchange just given their workers a dependable wage that they can actually know how much they make every month, which most of the rest of us do, and I think shouldn't be a privilege. So that's just my 2 cents.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak against the resolution? Anyone else? All right, we will move into the voting segment for the resolution. Liam, could we please get you're so quick. Thank you. The voting form is in the chat, so everyone please take this opportunity to vote on that. All right, we are going to leave that open for a little bit. I'm going to pass it back to Paul to talk about board elections.
All right. Thank you very much, Emily. We have two open board positions that we might have candidates running for tonight. First up is secretary. And is Tara here? Let's see, do we have Tara, are you online and able to speak? All right, the other position then that we have is the King County alternate. And I see we've got a nomination from David for Charlotte Kane Amaru. Charlotte, do you want to come off mute and introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Charlotte Kane Amaral. I am a PCO in the 43rd, right on the boundary between the 43rd and the 37th. I've been involved with the 43rd before. I've been a PCO for years. I've actually been in this position before. I've been a full-time alt and then a full-time member of the KCDCC before. I've been on the board of the Young Dems multiple times, and am just wanted to get back involved in the 43rd. I know what this position entails. I know the work that's ahead of me, and I'm happy to be representative of the 43rd going forward.
All right.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you,
answer
Charlotte.
any questions and anything that might come up.
Anyone have any questions for?
My precinct, I don't remember the number of it. It's I'm sure I have it on my certificates are over there. I will look that up really quickly with the county. My precinct number is 1843.
All right. Thank you, Charlotte. Any other nominations for King County alternate? All right, seeing no other nominations, we will hold a PCO vote for Charlotte. Liam, can you put a link to the voting form in the chat? On this vote, unlike the votes we've had earlier tonight, this vote is for PCOs only. Liam, confirm for me if someone is not a PCO and they vote, the voting system will just reject the vote.
That's
in our
correct.
tally, right? Okay. So if you're not positive you're a PCO, still vote, and the system will make sure that your vote doesn't count if you're not a PCO. That way we can over-index on getting all the PCOs who are here voting on this. And give me a quick second here while I submit my vote. All right. Board elections. And then moving on in the agenda. We're almost on time here. We had a resolution supporting an investigation into the death of, and my apologies, I'm probably going to mispronounce her name, Asanur Ezgi Aigi. That has been withdrawn, and Amy and Elizabetta, do you want to speak to the withdrawal of that
Yeah,
resolution?
I can start if that's okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to speak to why we are withdrawing the resolution, the co-sponsors. We are withdrawing because it has achieved its aims. And we want to thank our representatives for supporting this call to investigate the death of Aishinur Ezgi Egi. In a letter to Secretary of State Anthony Blinken last week, Senator Patty Murray and our Representative Pramila Jayapal requested an immediate, transparent, credible, and thorough independent United States investigation by the FBI into Aishinur Ezgi Egi's death. Senator Maria Cantwell also urged Blinken and President Joe Biden for an independent review into her death in a separate letter. And in addition to this, we want to thank our Senator Jamie Peterson and Representative Nicole Macri for signing on to a local statement entitled Washington state elected officials request the U.S. government lead independent investigation into the killing of American Aishinur Ezgi by Israeli forces. And just a brief personal note, I will remember Aishinur as this incredible young woman who loved to hold my friend's baby. And I just want to note that many of us in the 43rd knew her and loved her. And I want to hand over the floor to Elisabetta.
Hi, my name is Elisabetta. I'm actually joining this call from the West Bank. I've been here for a month and a half. I'll be back in Seattle in a few days. Like Aishinur, I joined an organization that offers protective presence, which means that just because we are internationals, it's less likely that Israeli settlers and soldiers will commit violence against Palestinians if we are there with them. And we also record the episode of violence if they occur. 2 Fridays ago, I was at the demonstration in Beta to protest against the settlement expansion, and I witnessed Aishinur's murder. I was just a few meters away from her. So I wanted to, I'm thankful that most of our elected officials are calling for an investigation, an independent investigation. But I want to take this chance to show why the statement of the Israeli forces is very false, and why it's very important that we step up to keep pressuring our officials. The statement of the Israeli forces claim that they aimed at the key instigator. Well, without even explaining what that really means, what it was doing. But I was there, and I can tell you there was no instigator. During the protest, the Israeli forces were firing tear gas and live ammunition, so we ran down the hill. And at the time of the killing, we were in an olive grove next to the street, standing still, waiting to decide what to do next. Aishinur was by an olive tree next to another volunteer. The soldiers had plenty of time to aim because no one was running, no one was moving. We heard 2 shots. One, they hit the metal, like a metal dumpster, and a few seconds later, we heard another one. And that's when I saw, Aishinur on the ground. There's another reason why, that shows why their account is a lie. By the time we reached the olive grove, we were far away from them, like at least 200 meters or more. And there is no possible way we could be seen as a threat. And also, I want to mention that, regardless of the details of what happened, using live ammunition in a protest is unacceptable. And Israeli forces are known for doing that regularly on civilians. In the last 4 years, they killed 17 Palestinians, mainly youth, just in the demonstration in Beta that happens every Friday. And so we really need to step up and pressure our elected officials and ask for accountability, not only for Aishinur, but for the Palestinians. And we must confront the complicity of our own country in this murder and the decades of Palestinian oppression, because the US funds Israel with billions of dollars in weapons, including the gun that killed Aishinur. So I've seen it firsthand times after times here that settlers and soldiers commit crimes and nothing happens. There are no consequences after that. And so we really need to make the public aware and push our elected officials to make radical changes there. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Are there any questions before we move on? And as Amy has put into the chat, the letters from Senator Murray and Representative Jayapal, the letters signed by Senator Jamie Peterson, and Representative Nicole Macri, so that you can see that as well. And yes, thank you, Elisabetta, for sharing your experience there, and for the work that you're doing there to hold space and try to keep the Palestinian people safer. Okay, last item on our agenda is a update from the National Convention. We have a couple of people. Oh, sorry. Before we do that, let's close the vote on the resolution, and we'll take the tally of that right now if you have it. Otherwise, we'll take it after.
Paul, just confirming this is on both the living wage and school funding ones.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. For the big five for school funding, with 20 votes yes, 1 vote no. And then for the resolution supporting livable minimum wage, we have 21 votes yes and 3 votes no.
Right. And the board election?
You want me to close that one as well?
Yeah, if you can close that as one as
Yep.
well.
In just a moment. And for the PCO only vote for the King County Democratic Central Committee alternate, Charlotte received 13 votes, and none of these candidates received 1 vote.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Last item on our agenda before committee reports, National Convention recap. Is Safa or Helen here and able to speak to their experiences at the convention? You can raise your hand so we can spotlight you.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, we can. Please.
Okay, there we go. Hi, I'm Safa Pira. I was one of the alternate uncommitted delegates to the DNC. And I was asked to kind of give a brief summary as to my experience at the DNC. It was an overwhelming experience. This is the first time I experienced anything like it. And I'm not necessarily anybody who has, I guess, been very politically involved. So the whole DNC experience was quite overwhelming. However, I was there with a specific mandate, being an uncommitted delegate. I want to express appreciation for the 43rd LD. I know I was working with many of y'all at the state convention as well, and so many of you were so helpful in getting the resolutions that we needed or wanted passed at the state level. And while my experience at the DNC was with most delegates very positive, I think there were a lot of delegates who were appreciative of the work that we were doing as uncommitted delegates, trying to shed light on an active genocide that is that this current administration is supporting. There was an overwhelming kind of feeling of us kind of being the party poopers, which was expected. Still, as I mentioned, we were there with a specific mandate. And the uncommitted movement ultimately was had 2 major asks: the immediate and permanent ceasefire and arms embargo, both which were lofty goals, I think, considering the current administration's positions. And over time, we also came up, so if anybody was kind of following what was going on with the news and the uncommitted movement, we also had a few minor asks, one of which was to have a Palestinian speaker on the stage, especially after the DNC and the Harris campaign had an Israeli hostage family up there, which of course, as uncommitted delegates, we were very supportive of having that voice up there on the stage. But we were also asking for a Palestinian perspective. I think it was on Wednesday, the day vice presidential candidate Walz was going to give his address, that we got and noticed that there would not be a Palestinian speaker that was given a position on the stage. And we began a sitting outside the convention, or outside the United Center, so right outside the hall. I will say personally, it was very devastating for me to kind of to see the silencing of those Palestinian voices, just because there was a huge contrast between what was being said on the stage of the DNC and throughout the whole program, highlighting kind of the diversity of the party, and then to see that there were specific voices that they just didn't want to hear from. And I think it was even more frustrating because we were elected to be there, right? We were not there as protesters. We were not there disrupting an event. We were there specifically voted in by people who wanted us to be there at that stage, making our kind of positions known. And there were instances of individuals within the uncommitted with uncommitted delegates in the various states that were kind of, not only were we not given a stage to speak at, but that any kind of opposition, I don't even call it opposition, but just there were, at some point during Biden's speech, there were some of the uncommitted delegates who had written arms embargo over their hand and placed it over their mouths. And there was a lot of kind of efforts to make sure that those people were covered up, like physically covered up from the presence of any media or, I don't know, just any viewers, whatever it was that they were trying to kind of shove us away. And being that we were highlighting, at least in Washington State, we were highlighting the Palestinian voices on our uncommitted, because both of our uncommitted delegates were Palestinian. And I'm not speaking on their behalf or on behalf of any of the other Palestinian delegates. But for me, it was very disheartening to see how the party had treated them. I am hoping that we as a party, I'm hoping that the greater Democratic Party, not necessarily this LD here, is able to learn from this moment and make sure that we are taking active steps in the state party to make sure that we are centering those voices or hearing those voices at the very least, right? Whether or not we disagree with, whether or not we agree with them is not the question. The question is whether or not they are given the position to actually, speak their narrative. And they were elected to do so. We were elected to do so. So there should have been no reason that we were not given that stage or that opportunity. Anyways, I understand that there was, other than that, it was a very festive atmosphere. But for me, that's not the feeling that I went in there with, was there with, or came out leaving with. So that's my perspective as one of the uncommitted delegates. And thank you for the time, Paul.
All right. Thank you, Saka. And is Helen here? I don't see Helen. All right. With that, we will turn towards committee reports. Let's see. First up, Finance, Brad.
Nothing in particular today.
All right. Thank you. And elections, Jacob. You still here, Jacob? Saw him earlier.
Jacob's not here.
Okay.
I believe Jacob said he had to drop.
Okay. In the agenda, he said we did it, and yes, we had a good August primary election. Two of our critical endorsed candidates, Sean Scott for the 43rd representative, and Alexis Mercedes Rink for City Council position 8. That's the citywide at-large position. Both of them won very handily. We're excited about that, and we look forward to getting out the vote for them all for the November general. PCO, Ryan.
Yeah, great segue. So everyone's going to get an email tomorrow. Lots and lots of opportunities in the next month and a half to help us get out the vote. I'm going to be sending you links to help out Sean, to help out Alexis, to help out with the Defend WA and the coordinated campaign. So if you have some free time and you would like to help, you're going to have lots of options to get out there, engage with our community, and make sure they're informed and know what's going to be on the ballot and are voting in the progressive Dems that we want to see, and also defeating all 4 of those terrible initiatives. So look out for it tomorrow. Also, I'm going to say it again, October 5th, Pancakes for Progress event. It's going to be a great opportunity to be around a bunch of other Dems, hear from candidates, have some pancakes. We're going to have vegan and gluten-free options. There's going to be some Costco muffins. It'll be a great time. You can pick up all of the stuff that you want, that if you'd like to distribute it while you're out there canvassing, or even just hand it out to your friends, whatever you'd like. Please, please come. We're looking forward to an awesome time. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ryan. Let's see. Policy and advocacy. Jeremy, I think, was not able to make it tonight. Yeah, it doesn't look like Jeremy's here. Meetings and events. I don't think Rye was able to make it. Rye was launching a new PAC tonight, so I believe he was at that. As I said earlier at the beginning of the meeting, he hosted the Sunset Soiree in August, which was a great event, great opportunity that we had to meet others in the 43rd in person and to engage face-to-face with our elected officials and candidates. That was an awesome event. Technology, Liam.
Just wanted to, you already mentioned this earlier on, but just want to reiterate, we are looking for someone to help us manage social media for the 43rd. If that is you, if you like doing the Twitters and the threads and all that good stuff, please get in touch with either Paul or Emily, and they can get you plugged in with all of us here. So, and that's all I have. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. And then King County reps. Neither Andrew or Sophia are able to be here. Congrats to Charlotte and being an alt. Justin, I don't know if you have anything to say. Otherwise, I've got a few notes from Andrew.
Nope, I don't have anything.
All right. So let's see a few things. The coordinated campaign. Hopefully y'all are receiving emails about that. Also look for information from Ryan about how to get involved in the coordinated campaign. KC Dems is going to be hosting a leadership interest meeting for people who want to get more involved in KC Dems. That'll be Sunday, October 13th via Zoom. Reorganization is coming up, I believe, in December. Yeah, in December. Let's say it's Sunday, December 15th via Zoom for the people are able to vote for that reorg. If you're interested in getting more involved in KC Dems directly, you can reach out to Andrew or Sophia or Justin or now Charlotte for more information on that. they're going to need volunteers to help with credentials tally, Q&As, etc. And then there's also going to be work to update the bylaws on KCDEMs. That was that update from Andrew on King County Democrats. And then finally, state reps, Amy, Sam, you have updates.
The big update is we're getting ready for one of our major meetings in a few weeks, or weekend after next, and just preparing for that big meeting. I know we're low on time, so Sam, if you have anything to add, go for it.
No, just it's in Yakima. The 14th is a priority district. If you have a few dollars lying around, please give them to Maria Beltran or one of the other candidates there. It's a really important race.
All right. Thank you all for that. The last item on our agenda then, and right smack dab on time at 8:55, good of the order. Is there any good of the order? Charlotte.
Hi, yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for electing me. You can reach out to me. I believe there's an email specifically for the KCDCC alts. I will be happy to be around. And if you need to contact me, you know where to find me. Yeah, thanks so much again.
Thank you, Charlotte. Welcome on board.
Glad to be here.
Any other good of the order? All right. Well, thank you all. This was a packed meeting. We appointed some PCOs. Congrats, Pete, Bridget, and Andrew. Endorsed a couple of candidates. Congrats to Sal and Nick and their positions. We endorsed the no position on all four of the state initiatives. We endorsed the Seattle Transit Levy. We endorsed a resolution supporting education funding, endorsed a resolution reiterating a support for minimum wage. We elected Charlotte King County Alt. We heard about what it is like on the ground in Gaza from Elizabeth. We're heartened to know that there is a call for an investigation into the murder of Aisanur. And then thank you, Safa, for the recap on the National Convention. And with that, we'll send out an email with some information on the No campaign and on the school funding. So you have links for that, so you know how you can get connected. And also more information on the PCO's Pancakes for Progress event. And you don't have to be a PCO to get involved there. If you're interested in doing canvassing, feel free to join the Pancakes for Progress event on October 5th, 10 to noon, with canvassing to follow. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. I see, thank you, Justin and Charlotte, and maybe others. With that, we will adjourn. Thank you all.
Thanks, everyone.